I'll never forget the look on my mother's face when I told our relatives what I did for a living. It wasn't disappointment exactly. It was something worse. It was embarrassment mixed with barely concealed contempt, the kind of expression you'd have if someone asked you about a family member in prison and you had to explain it at a dinner party. Let me take you back to where it all started to fall apart. It was my Uncle David's birthday party. Not a milestone birthday or anything. Just one of those family gatherings that happens twice a year, where everyone shows up, eats too much food, and catches up on what everyone else is doing with their lives. The party was at my parents' house, which was fitting because they loved hosting. They loved being the center of attention, showing off their home, their success, their status in the family hierarchy. My father owned a small manufacturing business that made industrial parts for construction equipment and machinery. My mother helped run it, handling the administrative and financial side. Together, they'd built something they were genuinely proud of. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable. Upper middle class. 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood with mature trees and well-maintained lawns. 2 cars, both relatively new. Annual vacation to somewhere warm. Country club membership they used maybe 3 times a year. The kind of life that looked successful from the outside, and that's what mattered most to them. I'd arrived late, around 7, after finishing my shift at the mall. I was 24 at the time, living at home not by choice, but by necessity. Rent in the city was absurd, and what I made fixing phones at a mall kiosk barely covered my car payment and phone bill, let alone an apartment deposit and first month's rent. The arrangement had been tolerable at first. I'd moved back home after college when job hunting had gone nowhere. My degree in business administration had proven to be worth slightly less than the paper it was printed on. 6 months of applications, a handful of interviews, 0 offers. Eventually, I'd taken the kiosk job just to have income, telling myself it was temporary. That was 3 years ago. My parents tolerated the arrangement, but made it clear through 1,000 small gestures that they weren't happy about it. The way my mother would sigh when I came home in my work uniform. The way my father would mention other people's kids who'd gotten real jobs after graduation. The way they'd ask when I planned to start applying myself. The house was full when I walked in. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. Everyone dressed in that casual but nice way people dress for family events. Pressed jeans, button-down shirts, sundresses, tasteful jewelry. The smell of grilled meat and baked goods filled the air. Someone had put on a playlist of classic rock, volume set to background conversation level. I was still wearing my work polo, the one with the company logo embroidered on the chest and my name tag pinned above it. The shirt was slightly wrinkled from 8 hours of leaning over a workbench. I probably smelled like isopropyl alcohol and electronics adhesive, though I'd gotten so used to it I couldn't tell anymore. My mother spotted me immediately. She had that gift, that maternal radar that could track her children's location in any crowded space. Her smile tightened just slightly, the way it always did when she was annoyed but trying to hide it in front of company. "There you are," she said, walking over with a drink in hand. Some kind of white wine, judging by the glass. "We were beginning to think you wouldn't show up." "Got held up at work," I said. "Customer came in at the last minute with a water-damaged phone. Took longer than expected." She nodded, but didn't ask any follow-up questions. She never did. Asking about my work would mean acknowledging it, and acknowledging it would mean accepting it, and she definitely hadn't accepted it. In her mind, this was still just a phase, a temporary situation I'd grow out of once I got serious about my future. "Well, you're here now," she said. "Go get some food before it's all gone. Your father grilled enough ribs to feed an army, but you know how Uncle Steve eats." I grabbed a plate and tried to blend into the background, a strategy that had worked well at previous family gatherings. I'd eat, make small talk with a few people, congratulate Uncle David on another year of not dying, and then leave early with some excuse about work the next day. That strategy lasted about 20 minutes. My cousin Jason spotted me near the food table. He was a year younger than me, freshly graduated from law school, already working at a firm downtown. Morrison and Bach, one of those old money firms with marble lobbies and partners who wore cufflinks. Jason had that confident energy of someone whose life was going exactly according to plan. The right schools, the right internships, the right job offer, no detours, no setbacks, just a straight line from ambition to achievement. "Hey, man," he said, clapping me on the shoulder with the casual familiarity of someone who hadn't seen you in months, but assumed nothing had changed. "Long time no see. How's everything going?" "Pretty good," I said, spooning potato salad onto my plate. "You know, working, staying busy." "Yeah? What are you doing these days? Last I heard you were looking for something in the corporate world." That had been 3 years ago, but I didn't correct him. Before I could answer, my Uncle David joined the conversation, followed by my father and a few other relatives whose names I could never quite remember but who always showed up at these things. Suddenly there was a small circle of people around us, all casual and friendly, all holding drinks and plates, but all waiting for the same information. The information people always wanted at family gatherings. What do you do? Who are you? What's your value in the great economic hierarchy of life? Jason was just asking what I do for work, I said, trying to keep my tone light, trying to make it sound like this was a normal question with a normal answer. "Oh, right," my father said, taking a sip of his beer. "I don't think we've really explained it to everyone." That phrasing, explained it. Like my job was something that required clarification or context, something that needed to be softened before it could be understood, like it was a condition that required careful wording to avoid shocking the relatives. I could have lied, could have said I was in tech or in retail management or some other vague description that sounded more impressive than it was. But I was tired of lying, tired of dodging questions at family gatherings, tired of pretending I was something I wasn't. "I fix phones," I said simply, clearly, "at a kiosk in the Westfield Mall, screen repairs, battery replacements, that kind of thing." The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. Nobody gasped or dropped their plate or looked at me with horror. It was just a subtle shift in energy, a small awkwardness that settled over the conversation like dust after a small collapse. The kind of silence that happens when someone says something that doesn't fit the expected narrative, and everyone needs a moment to recalibrate. My cousin Jason nodded slowly, his smile frozen in place. "Oh, that's cool. Very hands-on." "Screen repairs," my Uncle David repeated, as if saying it out loud would help him process it better. "So you're like, a technician?" "Exactly," I said. "People bring in their broken phones. I diagnose the problem, order parts if I need to, fix it, and return it to them." My mother laughed. It was a forced, high-pitched sound that didn't match any genuine emotion. The kind of laugh people make when they're uncomfortable and trying to fill space. "He repairs phones," she said to the group, emphasizing the word repairs as if that made it sound more professional, more legitimate. "In a mall. It's his career right now." The way she said career made everything clear. The slight pause before the word, the subtle emphasis, the addition of right now at the end, as if to remind everyone that this was temporary, that I was still in the process of becoming something better, that this wasn't who I actually was. She might as well have said, "He's embarrassing himself for minimum wage, but don't worry, surely this can't last forever." My Uncle David nodded slowly, carefully, the way you nod when you're trying to be polite, but have absolutely no idea what to say. "That's practical. Good to have technical skills. Can't outsource that, right? People will always need their phones fixed." He was trying. I appreciated that. But the effort itself highlighted how uncomfortable everyone was. "Jason just passed the bar," my Aunt Linda said, jumping in with the enthusiasm of someone rescuing a drowning conversation. "Starts at Morrison and Bach next month. Associate position, corporate law track. That's fantastic, my mother said immediately, her voice brightening like someone had flipped a switch. The relief in her voice was palpable. Finally, something worth celebrating. Finally, a topic that fit the expected narrative of family success. We're so proud of you, Jason, she continued. A lawyer, that's wonderful. That's exactly the kind of career that has real potential. Jason smiled modestly, but you could see he was pleased. Thanks, Aunt Susan. I'm excited. Nervous, but excited. As you should be, my father added. Big firms like that, they don't hire just anyone. That's a real accomplishment. The conversation shifted fully away from me then. Relief flooded my mother's face, like someone had just told her the cancer wasn't malignant after all. Crisis averted. No more uncomfortable questions about her underachieving son, who fixed cracked iPhone screens for people who probably thought of him as interchangeable with any other minimum-wage service worker. I stood there for another minute, chewing a rib, pretending I didn't notice the careful way everyone avoided looking at me, pretending I didn't hear the unspoken comparison between Jason's gleaming corporate future and my mall kiosk present. Then I excused myself and went outside. The back porch was empty. I sat on the steps, alone, staring at my phone out of habit. The screen was pristine, of course. No cracks, no scratches. I'd replaced it myself 3 times over the past year, upgrading components, fixing minor issues before they became major problems, installing new screen protectors with the precision of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. I was good at what I did. Really good. I could diagnose problems most people couldn't see. I could repair devices other technicians gave up on. I had customers who specifically requested me, who waited extra time to have me work on their phones because they trusted my work. But nobody at that party cared about any of that. They cared about titles and salaries and the kinds of jobs you could describe in one sentence without needing to explain or justify them. I heard the sliding door open behind me. Heavy footsteps, the smell of beer and grilled meat. My father came out, beer in hand, and sat down next to me on the steps without asking if I wanted company. We sat in silence for a minute, just the sound of cicadas and distant conversation from inside. Don't let it get to you, he said finally. I'm not. Your mother's just worried. We both are. About what? About your future, he said, taking a long drink. You're 24, you're smart, you went to college, you have a degree in business, and you're fixing phones at a mall kiosk. So? So that's not a career, that's a job. There's a difference. What's the difference? He sighed, the way parents sigh when they think their children are being deliberately obtuse. A career has a path, growth potential, benefits, stability, retirement plans. What you're doing is just treading water. You're not building anything. You're just surviving, barely. I'm learning. Learning what? How to replace screens. How to deal with angry customers who dropped their phones in toilets. Those aren't skills that will take you anywhere meaningful. I didn't respond. There was no point. He'd already decided what my work meant, what my life meant, and nothing I said would change his mind. He'd built a narrative about my failure, and any evidence to the contrary would just be dismissed as me being defensive or delusional. We're not trying to be hard on you, he continued, but we can't watch you waste your potential forever. You had opportunities, you had options, and you're throwing them all away because you're too scared or too comfortable or too something to actually commit to a real path forward. I am on a path forward. No, you're not. You're stalling. You're hiding at that kiosk because it's easy and it doesn't require any real commitment or risk. You're playing it safe in the most unambitious way possible. That's not true. Then prove it, he said, standing up. His voice had an edge now, frustration breaking through the veneer of paternal concern. Get a real job. Start a real career. Send out resumes. Network. Do something that shows us we didn't waste money on your education. Show us you're actually trying to build a life instead of just floating through one. He went back inside, the door sliding shut with more force than necessary, leaving me alone on the steps with the cicadas and the distant sound of people celebrating my uncle's birthday. None of them thinking about me anymore. All of them having moved on to more interesting topics. I sat there for another 10 minutes, then left without saying goodbye to anyone. Drove home in silence. Went to my room. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling. And I thought about that conversation. About the way my father had said real career like what I was doing was somehow imaginary. About the way my mother had laughed. About the way nobody had asked what I actually did all day. What skills I was actually developing. What I was actually learning. They'd just looked at the surface. Mall kiosk, phone repairs, minimum wage, and decided they understood everything they needed to know. And maybe that told me everything I needed to know about them. Before we get into what happened next, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that hype button to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. Now let's get back to the story. The conversation I'd been dreading came 2 days later. I got home from work around 9. Long day. We'd been slammed with repairs, back-to-back customers, most of them with cracked screens or battery issues. My hands smelled like isopropyl alcohol and adhesive remover. Both my parents were waiting for me in the living room. The TV was off. They were just sitting there, in that specific way parents sit when they need to have a serious talk. "We need to discuss something," my mother said. I set my backpack down. "Okay." "Sit." I sat. My father spoke first. "We've been talking about your situation, about where you are in life and where you're going." "Okay," I said again, "and we've decided that we need to make a change, for your own good." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What kind of change?" "We think you've gotten too comfortable here," my mother said. "Living at home, no real expenses, no pressure. You're coasting, and we've enabled that by letting you stay." "I pay rent," I said. $200 a month, my father said. "That's not rent. That's a token gesture. In the real world, you'd be paying 10 times that." "So what are you saying?" They looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. "We're saying you need to move out," my mother said. "We're asking you to leave." The words didn't quite register at first. "You're kicking me out?" "We're encouraging you to become independent," my father corrected. "There's a difference." "When?" "We think 2 weeks is fair. That gives you time to find a place, make arrangements." I stared at them. 2 weeks. "It's not negotiable," my mother said. Her voice was firm but not unkind, like she was delivering bad news she genuinely believed was for my benefit. "We've thought about this carefully. You need pressure. You need consequences. Right now, you have neither." "This is because of the party," I said. "Because I embarrassed you in front of everyone." "It's not about embarrassment," my father said. "It's about reality. You're almost 25. You should be building a career, not living at home and working retail." "I don't work retail. I repair phones." "That's the same thing," my mother said dismissively. "It's entry-level service work, and there's nothing wrong with that when you're 18 or 19 and trying to figure things out. But you're not 18 anymore. I'm learning valuable skills." "You're wasting time," my father said flatly. "And we're not going to keep enabling it. 2 weeks. After that, you'll need to find your own place. And if I can't afford it, then you'll need to figure out how to afford it," my mother said. "Get a roommate, find a cheaper area, get a second job, do what you need to do. That's what being an adult means." "This is insane. This is called tough love," my father said. "One day you'll thank us." I stood up. "Don't count on it." I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on my bed in the dark. They were actually doing this. Actually kicking me out. Not because I'd done anything wrong. Not because I was causing problems or being disrespectful. But because they were ashamed of what I did for a living. I spent the next hour doing math. Rent in a decent area, $200 minimum for a studio, $800, $900 if I found a room in a shared apartment. My income from the kiosk, roughly $2,100 per month after taxes. Car payment, $280. Insurance, $150. Phone, $85. Gas, $120, maybe more depending on where I lived. Food, $300 if I was careful. That left me with maybe $200, $300 per month for everything else. No savings, no buffer, one unexpected expense away from disaster. But I didn't have a choice. Over the next 2 weeks, I found a room in a 3-bedroom apartment 20 minutes from the mall. The landlord was a middle-aged woman who owned the place and rented out 2 of the bedrooms to help cover her mortgage. The other tenant was a guy in his 30s who worked nights at a warehouse. The room was small. A bed, a dresser, a closet. Shared bathroom, shared kitchen. $850 per month, first and last month up front. I gave her $1,700 in cash, which was everything I had saved over the past 6 months. On the day I moved out, my parents helped me carry boxes to my car. My mother cried a little, but not in a way that seemed like she was actually sad, more like she was emotional about what this symbolized. Her son leaving home, becoming independent. "You'll do great," she said, hugging me. "This is what you needed." My father shook my hand. "Call if you need anything." I nodded, knowing I wouldn't. I drove away from their house with everything I owned packed into my Honda Civic, and I didn't look back. The first few months were harder than I'd expected, not just financially, though that was brutal, but emotionally, psychologically. The constant stress of knowing that I was always one bad month away from not being able to pay rent, one car repair away from financial collapse, one unexpected expense away from having to choose between food and gas. I worked at the kiosk 6 days a week, sometimes 7 when they needed extra coverage. 10-hour shifts, on my feet the entire time, dealing with an endless parade of customers who treated me like I was invisible or incompetent or both. The kiosk itself was exactly what you'd imagine. A small, square booth in the middle of the mall corridor, between a sunglasses store and a place that sold phone cases shaped like food. Our sign was bright yellow and red, designed to catch the attention of passing shoppers. Inside was barely enough room for 2 people, a workbench with my tools and supplies, a small display of accessories we were supposed to upsell, and a register. The company policy was simple. Fix phones fast, upsell accessories, hit your numbers. They tracked everything. How many repairs per hour, how many warranties sold, customer satisfaction scores, average transaction value. If your numbers weren't good enough, you got fewer hours. If your numbers were really bad, you got fired. I learned quickly that the job wasn't really about fixing phones. It was about managing expectations and handling emotions. People would come in with shattered screens and expect miracles. They'd want it fixed in 15 minutes while they waited, even though the repair required careful precision and attention to detail. They'd argue about prices even though the prices were clearly posted. They'd claim their warranty should cover damage that was obviously their fault. They'd blame me when their phone had problems I didn't cause. There was the woman who brought in an iPhone that looked like it had been run over by a truck. The screen was completely destroyed, the frame was bent, the back was cracked. Water damage indicators were red. The phone wouldn't even turn on. "Can you fix it?" she asked. "Honestly, probably not," I said. "Even if I could replace the screen, there's clearly internal damage. You'd be better off upgrading through your carrier." "But can you try?" "I can try, but I'm telling you right now, the parts alone would cost more than what the phone is worth, and there's no guarantee it would work even then." She insisted. Paid for the screen replacement. I spent 2 hours carefully disassembling the device, replacing components, testing connections. Got the screen to light up briefly before it died again. Some internal component was fried, probably the logic board. When I told her, she was furious, demanded a refund, claimed I'd broken her phone even though it was already broken when she brought it in. When I explained our policy, labor is non-refundable if we attempt the repair as requested, she threatened to call corporate, leave bad reviews, tell everyone she knew never to use our service. My manager backed me up, but I still got dinged on my customer satisfaction score that week because she'd left a 1-star review. That kind of thing happened constantly, not every day, but often enough that I learned to spot the problem customers before they even opened their mouths. The ones who wanted someone to blame. The ones who thought service workers existed to absorb their frustration. The ones who'd never worked retail and had no concept of what the job actually entailed. But most people were fine. Polite, patient, grateful. They'd drop their phone off, come back an hour later, inspect the repair, pay, and thank me. Those transactions made up probably 90% of my work. And in between the repairs, during the slow periods, I paid attention. I paid attention to which phones broke most often. iPhones with screen issues dominated, especially the iPhone 6 and 7. The glass was too thin, the design too fragile. One drop, and the screen would spiderweb. Samsung Galaxies had battery problems. The batteries would swell, causing the back panel to pop off. Google Pixels had charging port failures. The ports were poorly designed and would wear out after a year of regular use. I paid attention to patterns in customer complaints, software issues that customers thought were hardware problems. My phone is slow usually meant too many apps running in the background, or the storage was full. My battery dies too fast usually meant they had brightness maxed out and location services enabled for every app. My phone won't charge sometimes meant the charging port was dirty, not broken. I learned to diagnose problems through questions instead of just assuming what needed to be fixed. When did this start happening? Have you dropped your phone recently? Did you install any new apps before this began? Have you tried a forced restart? Half my job became customer education, teaching people how to take care of their devices, showing them how to check their storage, explaining why they needed a case and screen protector, demonstrating the difference between a quality charger and a cheap knockoff that could damage their battery. I also paid attention to which repairs were profitable and which ones weren't. Screen replacements, high margin, quick turnaround. An iPhone screen cost me about $30 in parts. We charged $90 to $120 for the repair, and I could do it in 45 minutes. Battery replacements, easy, fast, decent profit. The batteries cost $15 to $20, we charged $60 to $80, and the job took 30 minutes. Water damage, low success rate, time-intensive, not worth it. People would pay the diagnostic fee but balk at the actual repair cost once they understood how much work was involved and how uncertain the outcome was. I noticed which accessories actually sold and which ones just took up space. Phone cases sold constantly. People understood they needed protection. Screen protectors sold less, but still consistently. Wireless chargers almost never sold. People didn't see the value. Pop sockets and decorative accessories were impulse buys that depended entirely on the customer's mood and whether I mentioned them. I noticed gaps in the market. Small businesses that needed bulk device repairs but had no good options. People who wanted same-day service but couldn't find it. Elderly customers who needed patient, clear explanations but felt intimidated by big tech stores. I started keeping notes. Observations that slowly formed patterns, ideas, opportunities. One customer in particular changed my perspective. He came in with 5 broken iPhones, all belonged to his employees at a small real estate office. All had cracked screens, all needed to be fixed as soon as possible because his team couldn't work without them. "Can you do all 5 today?" he asked. "Not all 5, I said. "I can do maybe 2 today, the rest tomorrow." "I'll pay extra if you can do them all." "It's not about money," I explained. "It's about time. Each repair takes about an hour. I have other customers. I can't just drop everything." He looked frustrated but understood. "Is there anywhere else I can take them?" "There are repair shops, but most of them will take 2 to 3 days. Some do same-day service, but you'd have to check." He ended up leaving 3 phones with me and taking 2 to another shop. When he came back the next day to pick up the ones I'd fixed, he looked stressed. The other shop had quoted him 3 business days for the repairs. His employees were sharing phones, working from home, complaining about the inconvenience. After he left, I thought about that interaction for the rest of my shift and most of my drive home. There was a real need here. A specific problem that wasn't being solved well by anyone. Small businesses with multiple devices that needed fast, reliable repair service. They couldn't afford to have employees without phones for days. They couldn't afford to pay retail prices for every repair. They needed someone who understood their specific needs and could serve them efficiently. And nobody was doing it. The big repair shops focused on individual consumers. The carrier stores tried to push people toward buying new devices. The manufacturer repair services were expensive and slow. But what if someone could offer businesses a better option? What if someone could provide package deals, volume discounts, loaner devices, priority service? I started thinking about it more seriously, not just as an interesting observation, but as an actual opportunity, a business idea. But I pushed it aside. I didn't have capital to start a business. I barely had enough money to pay rent. I was surviving, not thriving. Building a business required resources I didn't have, so I kept working, kept learning, kept paying attention. My roommates were fine. Maria, the landlord, worked as a nurse. Derek worked nights at a warehouse. We coexisted peacefully, but rarely interacted. The house was old, but maintained. It wasn't home, but it was shelter. I stopped talking to my parents entirely. They'd call occasionally, leave voicemails. I never returned them. I wasn't angry, just done. Done seeking approval from people who'd made it clear that approval was conditional. They'd kicked me out. They'd made their judgment. They'd decided I wasn't worth their support unless I changed to fit their definition of success. Fine. I'd accepted that. And I'd moved on. But during those months of just surviving, something shifted in me. I stopped caring what other people thought, not recklessly, but genuinely. I stopped caring whether my life impressed anyone, whether my parents approved, whether my job title sounded good. I cared about whether I was learning, growing, building skills that would matter someday. And I was. Every difficult customer taught me patience. Every complex repair taught me problem solving. Every slow afternoon taught me systems. Every interaction with my manager taught me how businesses optimize operations. I was getting an education no classroom could provide. I didn't realize it then. I was too focused on survival, but I was building the foundation. The skills, the knowledge, the understanding of what customers needed versus what businesses provided. And when the opportunity came, I'd be ready. I started doing repairs outside of work, quietly, carefully. I'd tell people at the kiosk that if they needed something done after hours, they could text me and I'd meet them somewhere, a coffee shop, a library, their office. I charged less than the kiosk did because I didn't have overhead, and I was faster because I wasn't juggling multiple customers at once. Word spread slowly at first, then faster. One customer would tell a friend. That friend would tell a coworker. That coworker would tell their boss. Within 3 months, I was doing 10 to 15 repairs a week outside of my regular job. Small stuff mostly. Screen replacements, battery swaps, charging port cleanings. I made an extra $800 to $1,000 a month. Not life-changing money, but enough to finally have a buffer, enough to breathe. I started buying parts in bulk from suppliers I found online. Screens, batteries, tools, adhesives. The more I bought, the cheaper it got per unit, which meant higher profit margins. I learned about supply chains, about sourcing, about quality control. I learned which suppliers were reliable and which ones sold cheap knockoffs that failed within weeks. I learned how to spot counterfeit parts. I learned how to negotiate prices. I also learned about customer acquisition and retention. The side work wasn't just about technical skill, it was about trust, about showing up on time, about communicating clearly, about following through on promises. Every repair I did was an audition, a chance to prove I was reliable, professional, worth recommending to others. I treated every customer like they were the most important person in the world. I explained what I was doing and why. I showed them the broken parts. I gave them honest assessments even when it meant less money for me. "This doesn't need a new screen," I'd say. "You just need a new screen protector and a case. Save your money." People remembered that. People appreciated that. And they came back. By month 6, I was doing 20 repairs a week. By month 9, I was doing 30. I was exhausted, working 7 days a week, barely sleeping, but I was building something. Something that felt real and sustainable and mine. I started thinking about what came next. About whether this could be more than just side income. About whether I could actually turn this into a legitimate business. The idea terrified me. I had no business experience beyond what I'd learned at the kiosk. I had no capital. I had no connections. I had no safety net. But I also had something most people didn't have: proof of concept. Customers who trusted me. A service that people needed. Skills that I'd honed through thousands of hours of practice. Maybe that was enough. I quit the kiosk job after a year and a half. It was terrifying. I'd been there for almost 3 years total. It was stable, predictable, safe, but it was also limiting. I couldn't grow the side business while working full-time at the kiosk. I couldn't take on bigger clients or offer more services. I couldn't scale. So I gave my 2 weeks' notice, thanked my manager, and walked away from the only steady paycheck I'd ever known. For the first month, I worked out of my bedroom. Customers would come to the apartment, and I'd fix their phones at a small desk I'd set up. Maria, my landlord, wasn't thrilled about the traffic, but tolerated it since I was paying rent on time. I created a simple website, just a basic landing page with my services, prices, and contact information. I spent $40 on it through a website builder. It looked amateur but functional. I started showing up in local search results. People would Google phone repair near me, and my site would appear. Not at the top, but somewhere on the first page. I got 2 to 3 inquiries a week from the website. Not much, but it was organic growth. People finding me without any advertising. By month 3, I'd saved enough to lease a small commercial space. It was basically a closet, 150 square feet in a strip mall near a grocery store, $800 a month. But it was mine, a real shop with real signage and real operating hours. I called it Quick Fix Mobile Repair. Not creative, but clear. People immediately understood what we did. I bought a used workbench, some stools, a few storage shelves. I ordered parts in larger quantities. I set up a basic point-of-sale system on an iPad. The shop opened on a Tuesday morning. I stood behind the counter from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., waiting for customers. 3 people came in that first day, 1 screen repair, 1 battery replacement, 1 consultation that didn't turn into a sale. By the end of the first month, I was averaging 5 customers a day. Not enough to thrive, but enough to survive. I started offering services the kiosk never did. Tablet repairs, laptop repairs, data recovery, device recycling, wholesale parts sales to other repair shops. I hired my first employee in month 6, a 19-year-old kid named Marcus, who was incredible with electronics but had dropped out of college because he couldn't afford it. I paid him $12 an hour and trained him on everything I knew. Having Marcus meant I could finally take a day off. It meant I could focus on business development while he handled walk-in repairs. It meant I could start thinking strategically instead of just tactically. By the end of year 1, we were doing 15 to 20 repairs a day. Revenue was around $12,000 a month. After expenses and Marcus's salary, I was taking home about $4,000. It wasn't much, but it was double what I'd made at the kiosk, and it was mine. By year 2, I'd hired 2 more technicians. We'd moved to a slightly bigger space. We'd established contracts with 3 small businesses for regular device maintenance. By year 3, we had 5 employees and 2 locations. We were doing corporate contracts with companies that had 50 to 100 employees. By year 4, we'd opened our 3rd location and started offering on-site repair services. We'd bought a van, equipped it with tools and parts, and started dispatching technicians to offices. Revenue hit 300,000 that year. After expenses and salaries and reinvestment, I took home about 60,000. I'd finally made it to a salary that felt comfortable. Not wealthy, but stable. Enough to move out of the shared apartment and into my own place. Enough to buy a reliable car. Enough to save. I still didn't tell my parents any of this. They'd call occasionally, leave voicemails. My mother would ask if I was still doing the phone thing at the mall. I never corrected her. As far as they knew, I was exactly where I'd been when they kicked me out. Still struggling, still proving them right. I was fine with that assumption. 7 years passed. 7 years of building, growing, learning, failing, adjusting, improving. By year 7, Quick Fix Mobile Repair had 8 locations across 3 cities. We employed 42 people. We had contracts with major corporations for fleet device management. We'd expanded into IT support and consultation services. Annual revenue was pushing $2 million. My personal income was around $200,000. I'd bought a house. Small, but mine. 2 bedrooms, a garage I'd converted into a home workshop where I still fix devices sometimes, just to stay sharp. I drove a decent car. I had savings. I had investments. I had health insurance and a retirement account. I wasn't wealthy by any means, but I was stable, independent, successful by any reasonable measure. And my parents had no idea. I'd see my sister occasionally. Emily had gotten married, had a kid, was living her own life. She never pressured me to reconnect with our parents, but she'd mention them sometimes in passing. "Dad's business is struggling," she said once over coffee. "They've been having problems for a while." "What kind of problems?" "I don't know exactly, but I can tell they're stressed. They're fighting more. Money's tight." I'd felt a small flicker of something. Not satisfaction exactly, but something close to it. They'd been so certain their way was the right way, so convinced their business acumen was superior. And now they were struggling while I was thriving. But I didn't say any of that to Emily, just nodded and changed the subject. I'd also see extended family at occasional gatherings, funerals mostly. Unavoidable events where showing up was more important than any personal feelings. At my grandmother's funeral, I saw my parents for the first time in 5 years. They looked older, tired, more stressed than I remembered. My mother approached me cautiously at the reception. "How are you?" she asked. "I'm good," I said. "Are you still doing the repair work?" "Yeah." She nodded. Didn't ask any follow-up questions. Didn't express interest or curiosity. Just nodded and moved on to talk to someone else. My father didn't approach me at all. Just watched from across the room, expression unreadable. I left before dessert was served. During those 7 years, I learned things about business that no college course had taught me. I learned that success wasn't about having the perfect plan. It was about adapting quickly when plans failed. I learned that reputation was more valuable than profit. That one happy customer told 3 people, but one unhappy customer told 10. I learned that employees were everything, that treating people with respect and paying them fairly created loyalty that no corporate perk could match. I learned that cash flow mattered more than revenue, that you could have $1 million business and still go bankrupt if you couldn't manage your cash. I learned that competition was usually less scary than it looked, that most businesses failed because of internal problems, not external threats. I learned that being small was sometimes an advantage, that we could move faster, adapt quicker, and care more than the big corporate chains. And I learned that the people who doubted you the loudest were often the ones who were most afraid of being wrong. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon. I was in our main location, doing a quarterly review with my operations manager, Tom, when my phone rang. We were going over profitability numbers for each location, discussing whether to expand our on-site services or focus on growing our retail footprint. Important decisions that would shape the next year of business. My phone vibrated on the desk. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers were usually spam calls or customers who'd found my personal number somehow and wanted immediate service. But something made me pick up. Intuition, curiosity, fate, whatever you want to call it. Hello? Silence on the other end. Not empty silence, but the kind where someone's there but gathering courage to speak. Hello? I repeated. Hi, is this… A pause. Heavy breathing. Is this my son? I recognized my mother's voice immediately, even though it had been years since I'd heard it. Older, more uncertain, rougher around the edges, but definitely her. The same voice that had laughed at me at the family party. The same voice that had told me I had 2 weeks to leave. Yes, I said, my tone neutral, professional. The voice I used with strangers, not with family. It's me. Oh, good. I wasn't sure if this was still your number. She sounded relieved but also nervous, like she was walking on ice and wasn't sure if it would hold her weight. We haven't talked in so long, I thought maybe you'd changed it. I haven't. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear her breathing on the other end, gathering courage or composure or whatever it took to say what she'd called to say. Tom looked at me, eyebrow raised in question. I held up one finger, give me a minute, and he nodded, turning his attention back to the spreadsheet on his laptop. I'm calling because we need to talk to you, my mother said finally. Your father and I, we need your help with something important. What kind of help? It's complicated, she said, which was exactly the kind of non-answer people give when they don't want to explain something over the phone. Could we meet? Maybe for coffee, tomorrow, or whenever you're available? I thought about saying no. Thought about telling her I was busy, that whatever they needed wasn't my problem, that they'd made their choice 7 years ago when they kicked me out, and now they had to live with it. The professional part of me, the part that had learned to manage emotions and maintain boundaries, wanted to decline politely and end the call. But the human part of me, the part that still remembered being their son before I became their disappointment, was curious. What could they possibly need from me? What had happened that would make them reach out after years of silence? Okay, I said. Tomorrow at 2. There's a coffee shop on Elm Street near the courthouse. Small place, usually quiet. You know the one? Yes, she said quickly. We'll be there. 2 o'clock. Thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet with us. She hung up before I could say anything else. Before I could change my mind or ask questions or establish any ground rules about what this meeting would or wouldn't be. I set my phone down and stared at it for a moment. Everything okay? Tom asked. Yeah, I said. Just family stuff. He nodded, tactful enough not to press for details. That was one of the things I appreciated about Tom. He understood boundaries, understood that work and personal life were separate spheres that only occasionally intersected, and when they did, you handled it professionally and moved on. We finished the quarterly review, made decisions about expansion timelines, discussed hiring needs for the next 6 months, normal business operations, the kind of strategic planning that would have bored me to tears 7 years ago, but that I now found genuinely engaging. After Tom left, I sat in my office alone, thinking about the call. 7 years. 7 years of complete silence, except for those occasional voicemail messages I never returned. 7 years of them assuming I'd failed while I was actually succeeding. 7 years of me building something substantial while they focused on their own problems, whatever those were. And now they needed help. I felt a complex mix of emotions that I couldn't quite separate. Curiosity about what had happened, satisfaction that they were coming to me for help instead of me needing theirs, wariness about what they might ask for, anger, old and cold, about how they'd treated me, sadness about the relationship we'd lost. But mostly I felt curious. What had brought them to this point? What had changed? What did they actually need? The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early. It was a small, independent place, the kind with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls and a chalkboard menu that changed daily. I ordered a black coffee and sat at a table near the window where I could see the parking lot. I watched people come and go. A young couple with a baby stroller, an elderly man reading a newspaper, a woman with a laptop who looked like she was working remotely. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware of the strange family drama about to unfold in their quiet coffee shop. At exactly 2 o'clock, a car pulled into the parking lot that I recognized. My father's Toyota, though it looked older now, less pristine than I remembered. They must have kept it all these years, or maybe they couldn't afford to replace it. They got out slowly. My father locked the door. My mother adjusted her purse. They walked toward the entrance with the tentative body language of people entering unfamiliar territory. When they came inside and spotted me, something flickered across both their faces. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition. Or the shock of seeing someone familiar after years of absence. They looked older, much older than they should have after just 7 years. My father's hair had gone mostly gray, and he'd lost weight in that unhealthy way that suggests stress rather than exercise. My mother had put on weight, or maybe just lost the sharp edges she'd always maintained, the polished appearance she'd considered essential to presenting the right image to the world. They both looked tired, worn down, like life had been grinding them slowly for years, and they'd finally run out of resistance. They saw me and walked over, awkward, uncertain, like teenagers approaching someone they had a crush on. "Thank you for meeting with us," my mother said, sitting down across from me. Her voice was quiet, almost submissive, nothing like the confident, judgmental tone she'd used at the family party all those years ago. My father sat next to her, didn't say anything, just looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Shame, regret, resignation, all of the above. "So what's this about?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Not warm, but not hostile either. Just factual, professional. The voice I used in business meetings with people I didn't know well. They looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind of wordless negotiation that happens between people who've been married for decades. Who would speak first? Who would explain? How much should they reveal? My father spoke finally. His voice was quiet, almost defeated, like someone admitting to a crime they'd committed years ago and had been running from ever since. "We need help," he said. "Our business is failing. Has been for a while now. We've tried everything we can think of, but we can't stop the bleeding." "What happened?" "A lot of things," my mother said. "Bad contracts that fell through. Losing key customers to competitors, cash flow problems that snowballed, equipment failures we couldn't afford to fix properly. We've had to lay off most of our staff. We're behind on almost everything: rent, utilities, equipment loans, insurance. We're about 3 months from bankruptcy," my father added, "unless we can turn things around fast, and we don't see how we can do that on our own." I sipped my coffee, didn't respond immediately. Let the silence stretch between us, not out of cruelty, but because I needed a moment to process what they were asking. "We know we don't have the right to ask you for anything," my mother said. Her voice cracked slightly, emotion breaking through the careful control she was trying to maintain. "We know we haven't been there for you. We know we handled things badly when you were younger, when you needed our support. But we're desperate," my father said, leaning forward slightly. "And you're the only person we know who understands business operations and finance. The only person who might know how to fix something like this." I almost laughed. The irony was too perfect. Too ridiculous. They'd kicked me out for fixing phones, called it a dead-end job with no future, told me I was wasting my potential, and now they wanted me to fix their dying business. "You think I understand business operations," I said, keeping my tone neutral despite the absurdity. "Your sister mentioned you've done well for yourself. my mother said carefully, choosing each word like she was navigating a minefield. That you own some kind of repair business. Multiple locations. We didn't realize. We thought you were still. We thought. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Unable to admit that they'd assumed I'd failed, that they'd written me off, that they'd been completely wrong about everything. Several repair businesses, I corrected her. 8 locations across 3 cities. 42 employees, corporate contracts, on-site services, annual revenue approaching $2 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Total. The kind of silence that happens when someone tells you something that completely contradicts everything you believed to be true. My father stared at me like I'd just revealed I was secretly an astronaut or a professional athlete or something equally impossible, given what he thought he knew about my life. My mother's mouth opened slightly, then closed. She blinked several times, processing. 2 million? My father repeated. His voice was barely a whisper. Dollars? Give or take, I said. Last year we hit 1.8. This year we're on track for 2.2 if our growth continues. How is that possible? My mother asked. Not skeptically, but genuinely. Like she couldn't reconcile the image she had of me, struggling phone repair guy at a mall kiosk, with the reality I was describing. You were fixing phones at a mall. I still fix phones, I said. I just do it at scale now, with systems and processes and employees and contracts and everything else that turns a job into a business. The same things you said didn't matter. The same skills you said weren't valuable. My father leaned back in his chair, processing this information, trying to reorganize his entire understanding of the past 7 years, trying to figure out where he'd gone wrong in his assessment. So you're successful, my mother said slowly, carefully, like she was testing the words to see if they were real. You've built something real, something substantial. Yeah. A long pause. They looked at each other again, more silent communication. Then you can help us, my father said, leaning forward with something approaching hope in his voice. You understand what we're going through. You know how to solve problems like this. You've built a successful business from basically nothing. You can help us figure out how to save ours. I looked at them, really looked at them, saw the desperation, saw the fear, saw the uncomfortable reality that the son they'd dismissed as a failure was now the only person who might be able to save them from the consequences of their own decisions. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no triumph, just a kind of cold clarity. I don't think I can help you, I said. Why not? My mother asked. We're family. Doesn't that mean something? It used to, I said, before you kicked me out for embarrassing you. We didn't kick you out, my father said. We encouraged you to be independent. You gave me 2 weeks to leave because you were ashamed of what I did for a living. We were trying to motivate you. You were trying to control me, I said. And when I wouldn't comply, you got rid of me. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We made mistakes. We admit that. But we're asking for help now. Not money, just advice, just your expertise. Why should I give it to you? Because we're your parents, she said. I thought about that, about what being a parent meant, about whether DNA and childhood history created an obligation that transcended everything else. You know what I learned fixing phones? I said finally. I learned that not everything can be repaired. Sometimes the damage is too deep. Sometimes the internal components are too corroded. Sometimes the cost of repair exceeds the value of the device. What are you saying? My father asked. I'm saying I'm not the right person to fix this. Your business is failing because of decisions you made over years, maybe decades. That's not something I can fix with advice or expertise. That's fundamental structural damage. So you're going to let us lose everything? My mother asked. I'm not letting you do anything, I said. This isn't my responsibility. But you could help if you wanted to. Probably, I admitted. But I don't want to. My father's face hardened. So this is revenge? Is that it? No, I said honestly. Revenge would be cruel. Revenge would be gloating or rubbing your failure in your face. I'm not doing that. I'm just setting a boundary. You made it clear 7 years ago that my choices and my life weren't worth your support. I'm simply returning that same energy. We said we were sorry, my mother said. You said you made mistakes, I corrected. That's different from being sorry. Sorry means you understand the harm you caused. Sorry means you've changed. You haven't changed. You're just desperate. I stood up. I hope you figure things out. I genuinely do. But it won't be with my help. Please, my mother said. We're begging you. I looked at her, saw the desperation, the fear, the realization that the son they'd dismissed 7 years ago was now the only person who might be able to save them. You kicked me out for fixing phones at a mall, I said quietly. You told me I was wasting my life. You said I wasn't building anything real. And now, when your business breaks, you want me to fix that too. I walked to the door, stopped, turned back. The answer is no. I left them sitting there, drove back to my main shop, went into my office, closed the door, and I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. My parents called 4 more times over the next 2 weeks. I didn't answer. They sent emails. I didn't respond. They showed up at my house once. I pretended not to be home. Eventually, they stopped trying. I heard through Emily that they'd filed for bankruptcy, liquidated the business, sold the house, moved into a smaller apartment. My father found work as a consultant for another manufacturing company. My mother took a part-time administrative job. They were surviving, but diminished. Their comfortable middle-class life reduced to something much smaller and more fragile. I felt neither satisfaction nor guilt about their situation. It was simply what it was. Consequences of decisions they'd made long before I'd entered the picture. The repair business continued to grow. We opened 2 more locations that year. Revenue crossed $3 million. I hired a proper executive team to handle operations while I focused on strategy and expansion. I bought a better house, started dating someone I actually liked, took my first real vacation in 7 years. Life moved forward. Sometimes I'd think about my parents, about the look on their faces when I'd told them how successful the business had become, the shock, the disbelief, the desperate hope that I'd helped them, and I'd wonder if I'd made the right choice, if blood really should mean something more than boundaries and self-respect. But then, I'd remember that night at the family party, the way my mother had laughed when I'd told everyone what I did, the way she'd said career with such obvious disdain, the way they'd kicked me out not because I was failing, but because they were embarrassed. And I'd remember the years of silence, the complete absence of interest in my life or my work, the assumption that I'd failed because I'd chosen a path they didn't approve of. They'd made their judgment. They'd decided I wasn't worth their support. I'd simply accepted that decision and moved on without them. Maybe that made me cold. Maybe that made me unforgiving. Maybe that made me a bad son. But it also made me free.